everyone. Thanks for tuning into This Tangled Life. I'm Megan Cullip, and I'm here with Dr. Amber Layton from ATB Counseling. Thanks for stopping in.
Yeah, thanks for having me today.
Yeah. So can you give us a rundown of your practice? So what kind of clients do you see? What kind of modalities do you use? We know that we've talked a lot about how different providers use a lot of different methods. So tell us about your practice.
Right, okay. So ATB stands for Actions, Thoughts, and Behaviors. We're a behavioral health clinic over off of Apache Street. We specialize in working with children all the way up to geriatric patients. We some of our providers, we have an art therapist who has dual licensure for mental health counseling and art therapy. And then the rest of us have either social work degrees, counseling degrees, and we are trained in EMDR.
Great. And actually, let's quickly talk a bit about EMDR, because I've heard it's kind of a burgeoning science when it comes to trauma work, but go for it.
Right. So EMDR stands for eye movement reprocessing desensitization. And what it does is it uses the brain's natural ability to process. So when people sleep at night and get deep sleep, they hit REM, which is rapid eye movement. And with EMDR, we replicate the same eye processes, but obviously you're conscious. We do not coach people on what they're going to believe or think or say. We allow the brain to do its natural processing based on negative beliefs they may have about an event.
Great. That sounds super interesting. What is the process like, though? Like, if I'm going in and I don't know anything, I mean, we talk a lot on this. We want to talk on this podcast, just informing folks who might be stepping into something new, like EMDR. What could I expect?
Right. So within the field of EMDR, there are different modalities you can use. So the first one, like I've been using with some of my newer clients about their anxiety with coronavirus, we do just desensitizing. And so we're just trying to get their level of distress down, that we don't go into any deep feelings or thoughts. And then what we have, so that's desensitizing. The next level would be EMD little r, which is very contained. So say, for example, you had a car wreck and you wanted to be able to drive without having anxiety, we would keep it limited to only dealing with that wreck. And then EMD big R is what we want to achieve as clinicians, which is free association based. And so we would open up the pathway. So if you said like driving makes you feel like you're not safe, I would ask you, well, when's the first time you remember feeling not safe? And we want to go for a younger memory, and then we would process it, and everything along that neural pathway would clear out.
Wow.
So it's an 8-phase process. It's
Okay.
actually pretty in-depth. And so if people are seeking just knowing what they're going for. Desensitizing can be first time I meet you. EMD little r, we would do some resourcing before we began. And then free association would be with probably 3 or 4 sessions in, depending on how quickly the client is doing their resourcing and doing their, out of office work.
Sure. Well, we're finding there's like always new stuff going on in your field and more learning, especially as brain science being the youngest of health sciences, right?
It's pretty new.
Yeah. And so there is a doctor in front of your name. What was your specialty in your PhD work?
Yes, so my PhD work is in advanced human behavior. So I'm trained as a licensed clinician, and then looking more at how the brain and the neurology are tied to our mental health and mental well-being.
Gotcha. Cool. So speaking of trauma and disruptions of daily living and such, we are in this awkward COVID-19 time, and that seems to be sort of flashing a spotlight on a lot of different issues that maybe a lot of us average folk, it's kind of gone unnoticed, and then all of a sudden we're thrust into this bizarro time. What kind of issues are being brought to light that you're seeing in your practice?
Right. So first off, I want to state that the younger generations, this is awkward, right? So we have some older generations who have gone through polio and measles and mumps. And even in the beginning 80s, we had the HIV outbreak, right? So some of our older generations have already experienced similar, panic, maybe not quarantine type things, but panic. And so we're seeing a lot of increased anxiety about what's going to happen. that can even lead to thoughts of, do I have it? I don't feel right. They're saying these are the symptoms. Then the next day there's a change of the symptoms. And so people not knowing, is it safe? Have they been somewhere? We see in the news where people from certain outlets have been tested, or possibly even there's been some fatalities from some local retailers, and then people having that kind of fear-based thinking about, when was the last time I was there? Did I run into somebody? Could I have it? What do I do if I do have it? How do I take care of my family? How do I self-quarantine? There's a lot of kind of uncertain type thinking, which leads to fear-based or flight or flight-based thinking.
Mm-hmm. And of course, the experience of quarantine is certainly not a one-size-fits-all scenario, right? And so what are some of the things that maybe we haven't thought about? So we would say, like, maybe the flip side of quarantine. Are there people having positive experiences in quarantine? What are people's negative experiences in quarantine?
Right. Well, first I want to say the whole term quarantine was the original word, right? And then somebody decided to change it to social distancing, which as a human behavioralist is a horrible name for it, because right now we need to be social. We need to be reaching out to our friends, family, and loved ones. We're social creatures by nature. Physical distancing is important for the spread of virus, right? So keeping that up to date. But I've seen a lot of positive changes, families getting to spend quality time together, kids that only maybe see their parents for a couple hours a day now are seeing them all day long. There are some struggles with homeschooling. I will be first to admit it's not that easy, especially with new age techniques. But they're able to have quality time. I see a lot of kids out riding bikes. All of my introverted clients are like, yeah, this is the best. And my extroverted clients are like, this is horribly
We're
hard.
withering on the vine over here.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so that's a good way for people just to understand personality. Personality is part of behavioral health, and it's just the tip of an iceberg, so to speak. And so just even knowing, like, the extroverts struggle and the introverts are like, yeah, we got this. No big deal.
We've been training for this forever.
Yeah.
Right. And so if I was an individual that maybe hasn't done a lot of introspective work or something, hasn't taken like the Myers-Briggs or something like that, and doesn't know a lot about my own personality, like, what kinds of things could I do in quarantine to gain more self-knowledge? It seems like a pretty good time to gain some more self-knowledge.
Right. So there are a lot of those Myers-Briggs big factor 5 that tests out there that you can take for free. The Jung personality type, they can take all of those on the internet for free. Also, just being aware, like, this is a good time to be aware of what's going on inside you internally. You know, if you wake up with anxiety, like, it's okay. Like, we're all going through this. We don't know from one day to the next. The governor changes their mind often. The president changes his mind often. And so just kind of like rolling with the punches, and it's okay to be anxious. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be happy and enjoying this. So you have some people who feel guilty about loving being, with their families more. So it's all of those are appropriate things to be, and just trying to figure out what may be causing it. If you feel anxiety every time you watch the news, then don't watch the news, or limit it to only one time a day.
Sure. Right, which kind of brings up this whole, we're all having to adjust here. We're not going to snap our fingers at the end of summer and find that we're back to where we were. And adjusting is hard in of itself, right? Change is hard in itself, but so is living with constant uncertainty. Right. So can you talk a bit about ways in which we can handle this adjustment and deal with uncertainty? Right.
So whether we like to believe it or not, humans really do like structure and routine. Mm-hmm. So trying to keep some sort of a routine, whether that means, showering daily, having a normal bedtime, maybe adjusting your bedtime to later and your wake up time to a little bit later. Those are all appropriate, but binging all night and then sleeping all day, like we could get our circadian rhythms off, which someday we're going to have to go back to somewhat of a normalcy, whatever that means. But being able to just kind of having some of that same structure. I know some people are like, if I put my work boots on in the morning, then I'm more productive. Or if I, put on my normal outfit, I get more things done. And so just watching, kind of monitoring that, it's been 3 days since I've showered, probably should shower. And,
I can't imagine. I feel like a slime bucket.
Right.
3 days.
Well, Sometimes
Well.
people just don't want to, right? Well, we
Yeah.
binge watch, I don't know, Tiger King or whatever people are watching out there, you know, and you get caught up, right? And it's 3 a.m. and, you know, Carol Baskins is still not admitting where her husband is or whatever.
Yeah, so are
craziness
you
is
far
out there.
along in Tiger King? Is that what's happening right now?
Yeah, I finished it. It's pretty,
Okay.
I had to diagnose him, you know.
Oh, right. Okay, right. Of course. That's gonna be episode 2. Is gonna be character profiles
Right.
of Tiger King. Like, what are the factor 5 there? The
Right.
big 5. Well, I'd be interested to know then a bit about the science of habit forming. If you
Right.
can go kind of into that, because that's one of my fears is so we start picking up these habits, and now we're at what, 60, 66, 67, day 67.
Absolutely.
So that's a long time to be doing something that you've never done before, right? And so go into
Right. And when we talk diagnosing, for example, PTSD, most people know what or have heard the term PTSD.
Sure.
And so one of the requirements for PTSD is that you have had to have had symptoms for longer than 28 days. And so we see that our bodies in general, that 28-day period, even non-smoking ads, they usually say 21 to 28 days and you won't crave it anymore. So we see about the 3 to 4 week window of positive or negative symptoms changing, right? And so kind of keeping that 21-day, 28-day mentality in mind of, you know, to really see changes, or, oh man, I haven't, you know, walked my dog in 21 days or whatever is
Sure.
going on. And so our bodies, it's usually about the 3 to 4 week window when our bodies really start to adjust. Now, there's a lot of new science called positive psychology, and that's where, you know, reading positive affirmations and that will help you. Those are all great things, but the mind is very clever. So remember when you're young, you put your A+ paper on the fridge,
Mm-hmm.
and about 3 or 4 days later, it's still on the fridge, but you don't pay attention to it, right? And so making sure if you're going to write positive affirmations that you place them in different places around your house so that your mind doesn't just go, oh, we don't need to worry about that. We already know what's on there.
Yeah. Okay, so speaking of positive affirmations, positives and negatives and stuff, that whole 5-to-1 rule, that 1 negative and you have to have 5 positives to counteract the 1 negative. I've been like waiting to ask a real scientist about this,
Right.
so I'm going to take that opportunity now.
Yes, don't quote me on the number because I don't know the exact, but it's actually way more than that. And so there's a reason for that, and that all stems back into our fight or flight. I call it our old brain. So that's going to be the part of our brain that is most dominant when we're born. So it's going to be responsible for basically eating, breathing, and sleeping. And so that brain keeps us alive. And that's kind of what some of us have shifted into, is this kind of survival state mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And so our brain takes information in and processes it very rapidly and based on experiences we've had. So if, for example, a saber-toothed tiger walked in here, you and I would probably be like, oh, wow, somebody's pet got out, right? But
I don't know. I think you've been watching too much Tiger King, because I'd be like, oh, no.
Well, but like 60 or 70 or prehistoric times, right?
Sure.
We knew that that was danger and we had to run.
Right.
Generally speaking, we don't have encounters like that on a daily
Sure.
basis. And so our brains don't need to remember happy to survive. And that's where that science comes from, is we have to remember the negative to survive. And that's why when people keep having negative experiences, they become very surreal to them. And so that's what we talk about as triggers. And that's because at one point it wasn't safe, whatever it is. And so we have to work using positive type affirmations, mindfulness techniques, different techniques to retrain our brain that, yes, this used to be a threat, but we no longer have to be worried about it.
Right. So when we're talking about retraining our brains, like part of that is the EMDR and like what you experience in a clinical setting,
Absolutely.
which is obviously super helpful. There are just ways of retraining our own selves that we need a professional to help with that. What are some things that we can do outside the clinical setting to help retrain ourselves? One is positive affirmations that you mentioned. What else?
Right. Exercise is wonderful, right? Get some fresh air, deep breathing. So one of the first things that happens for most people when they're experiencing anxiety or a threat is they start breathing really shallow, right? And that's shifting our energy in our body to be able to fight, flight, or freeze, right? And so keeping deep breaths, right? Taking that deep breath so our brains don't get the signal from our lungs that, you know, something's not okay. Simple as eating, right? Our stomachs will send signals to our brain that says, hey, you haven't fed us all day. We're starving to death. Most of us probably could go a few days without eating, but our body sends that signal on a neurological basis that says something's not right, we're not eating. So even if it's a small meal, we can eat small meals. There's foods out there that help reduce anxiety, blueberries being one. So getting more color in our diet is good. Yoga is great. Anybody with anxiety or ADHD struggles with yoga because we have to get our brain to be quiet, right? People with depression, they can do yoga all day long, but they maybe can't go and run or walk.
Sure.
Whereas people with anxiety and ADHD generally can be a little bit more active. And so just knowing where you're at and just starting with baby steps. There are apps out there that help with guided meditation. One of the things we do in EMDR is we call it containment. Sometimes you'll hear it as like wearing different hats, right? So you have to go to work and you have to kind of stop thinking about what happened at home. It's a higher level of kind of putting things in a box, so to speak, and dealing with them when it's appropriate time. If you're religious, you can use your faith, right, as another way of kind of calming down the senses and not rewiring, but having something to turn to. Taking a hot shower, that's good for some people, but if you have issues breathing because of your anxiety, you're going to get in that steamy, thick air, and it's going to be worse for you, right? And so it's okay. That's just not a resource for you.
Right. So you're talking about coming up with resources that work for you as an individual.
Yeah,
and
music
there are many,
is
many
good
options.
for some.
Sure.
Cooking is good for others. I mean, there's a lot of different things. TV can be great too, right? As long as you're not getting triggered or freaked out or
wasting every hour of your life
on
any of these things. So to be fair,
Yes,
you also shouldn't waste like every hour of your life.
Well, and it's also
obsessively running or whatever.
appropriate to think about the things that are bothering you and setting a time limit on that, right? Like some of my clients I work with PTSD, I'm like, set a specific time of day every day, and you're allowed to think about that incident for whatever is comfortable for you, and then you stop for the rest of the day, and then your body knows, like, hey, at this time, like, if I still need to be in that thought pattern, that's when I can come back to it.
Right. Yeah, that's a really helpful one. So as a scientist, what has been the most interesting phenomena that has come out of this time for you to observe? Like, I'm sure that your brain is always kind of like on high alert with everything that's going on. So what's one of the most interesting things you've been thinking about during this time?
I just really, it cracks me up because I feel like we're going back to like the 1960s in a sense of like having quality time with our families. People are out. When I grew up, we rode bikes till the street lights came on, and then that was our signal, right, to come home. I think technology has increased our anxiety a lot, right? Like we used to call people and leave a voicemail on like an old school answering machine, and then you went on with your day, right? You call somebody or text somebody now and they don't respond in like 30 seconds, and you're like, oh my gosh, they're in a ditch dying, right?
Or like, what did I do?
Yeah.
What did I do?
What did I do, right? What did I say to make them mad?
Totally.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think we're kind of like going back to like what humans really crave, and that is being attached to whoever that is, whether it's a caretaker, a family member, a spouse, a child, friends. You know, sometimes we have to recreate our families, right? And we're able to do that. Now, granted, we have to be careful with the distancing, but that doesn't mean that we can't, you know, there's so many tele or video type platforms these days where you can see each other. You know, internet isn't like dial up, right? You could either be on the internet or call somebody. Nowadays, we have it at all of our fingertips. Some, not all, right? There's still some communities that don't. I see that happening. I think we all just need to remember that, like, science is a process. You know, my PhD took a long time because there was certain processes that had to be in place, and, you know, we need to be a little bit more gracious with the data coming out because nobody in the world really knows. And so, yes, there are great ideas, but it's not backed by science fully because we haven't had time to analyze it and allow the whole process to happen. Just like old school science fair, it's a process. Sometimes it's all the night before because we forget to tell our parents. But
were you one of those types, or were you like science fair
no,
nerd?
I'm a nerd.
Yeah,
so,
me too.
Yeah.
I love the science fair.
In 6th grade, I think I did a science fair on social pressure. So there you go. And I had popular kids not follow the directions and saw how many people would just follow them because of their popularity.
I like that. So you were set up to become a behaviorist real early on.
Oh, yeah.
11 years old or so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did one on, so one of the biggest mistakes I ever made in my life was to do one on acid rain because I thought the name sounded cool.
Right.
But it was super boring. You just had to gather soil everywhere and put it in a jar. I mean, I won, but I was like, that was the lamest.
Yeah.
It sounded so awesome.
Well, that's because you're extroverted. So,
That's
right? You needed that connection.
Yes, I can't do it with just soil.
The other thing as a scientist that makes me super happy is like how Mother Nature's healing right now. So, we're seeing massive hatchings of sea turtles, and we're seeing dolphins returning to canals that they haven't been in years.
Yeah, the Venice ones, yeah.
Whether you want to believe in global warming or not a debate I want to get into, but we're starting to see like some of our ecosystems coming back to like normal, whatever that means, right? And so it's like everybody's taking time to just like be still and work on what's vital to them. And
right. So going back to that constantly changing data. So I'm like obsessed with the data. It doesn't bring any anxiety to my life, but what if that kind of data tended to make one nervous? Should we just sort of stay in the dark, or is it consume data but only up to a point, or is there a way to think about it? Because I think also, I remember at least when we were making decisions about some group gatherings that I do in my other job, and it was kind of like, well, let's give this whole like, we're going to reassess on like Easter or whatever. And in the back of my head, I'm like, we're going to go past Easter, but I want to give them some sort of, we're going to reassess at this time. And so what's some of your advice on that? Because when you have this open-ended, where's the deadline, that can be super, super stressful. So,
well, and I think a lot of that turns back to self-reflection, right? We know that certain chronic illness, people are a higher risk. We know age, kind of.
Sure.
There's debate on whether the age thing is right, but we just know generally as you get older, it's harder to heal from things. That's just part of life.
Sure.
And so knowing that, are you high risk? Are you not high risk? Do you smoke, right? We know it attacks respiratory. It's attacking other places, but primarily it's our respiratory system. Do you smoke? Have you had pneumonia? Do you have asthma, right? Like knowing these things about ourselves and being able to make those determinations of, is it appropriate for me to go out? Is it safe for me to go out? I think the biggest thing that we need to focus on is being accepting of whatever people's beliefs are. There is a lot of people who think that this is all conspiracy and governmental. That's fine. That's their opinion. They have a right to have their perspective. And so just kind of, make sure your resources are good. Wikipedia is not accurate. Okay. And there's people out there that do know these things, right? Mm-hmm. You see a virologist get online and talk about it. Okay, there's one good key. Right. I know there was one going around for a little while, a video that has been often on Facebook about she's a doctor of some sort. But my biggest issue with that video was they didn't say like, hey, I'm Dr. Da-da-da. This is what my degree's in. This is where I went to school.
Sure.
So maybe they really are, but
they have a doctorate in underwater basket weaving.
They also didn't give that information.
Right,
so,
right.
That's kind of what we call a red flag, right? Maybe they just forgot. Maybe they're so passionate about what they were talking about, they didn't talk about their credentials. But making sure that the people you're getting your information from are credible, whatever that means, and researching what is important to you. Like you said, if you're high risk, then you probably want to be more aware of where people have been or where people have contracted it, or, also planning if you have to go to the store, because we do, right? Most of us live going to the store weekly. We don't live on the farms like family members used to.
Right.
Making a list so that you can limit your time in the building.
Right. Yeah. So, are there any other interesting thoughts, tips? I mean, I'm sure that you have interesting thoughts all day, so not to limit the amount of interest that can go on here. But anything else that you'd like to share for just folks listening?
Right. Well, so first off, the thing that cracks me up with all of this hand sanitizer and everything is that's great, but they say that you start with a tickle in the throat, right? And what do people generally do when their throat hurts?
Drink.
They spit, right? So, like,
Wait, I don't spit. Hold on.
Maybe I'm a
Wait
little
second.
OCD,
Hold
but
on.
like my biggest thing is like spray the bottoms of your shoes or leave them
Yes.
outside
Yes.
because if people are spitting on the ground, like, but I don't hear anybody talking about that. So they could just be my little bit of OCD-ness. But I'm like, spray your shoes because I don't watch where I walk 100% of the
Yeah, spraying
time.
the shoes is a good one.
But
yeah.
most people do, right? If your throat hurts, you clear it and whatever. I don't know. But that. The other interesting thing is, you know, when this all began, I have some clients with different disorders and different age groups.
Sure.
And I'm like, what do I do with these kids? Like, how do I make these kids feel like this is something that happens, right? And so some of my kid clients and I were writing books about animals that hibernate. Granted, the timing is not the same, right? Generally, hibernation happens in winter. But we even see in nature that animals will go into shelter for periods of time. And so being able to show them that, like, you know, like the ants go into holes or the bears go in or
The murder hornets
go
into
somewhere.
wherever they go.
Yeah, a lab or whatever.
A lab.
A hive.
A hive.
So, and
They
so,
could be in your backyard, guys.
right? When you say things, and then all of a sudden kids are like, oh, wait, you know, okay.
Right. I could be a bear.
My dog
Whatever.
goes into
Yeah.
his kennel, which is
Sure.
like a den, and, you
Sure.
know, I may not like it, but it's something that
Yeah.
happens.
What else can we do? I mean, speaking of kids, as parents, what else can we do with our children? Because we're giving off all sorts of emotions and stuff that our kids are probably picking up on. But what
Absolutely.
can we do to be intentional in dealing with our kids during this time?
Well, and that's like a huge change in behavioral health, right? We used to say, oh, kids don't remember before 5. Not true. And so remember when they were newborns, and your newborn would be fussy if you were carrying emotion, right? They could sense it. And so just remember, kids sense things. They're not dumb. They may not have the language to say, like, you know, why are you having a bad day today, right? But they can feel it. And so just being able to acknowledge it with them, they don't need to know at adult level, right? But
Right,
just,
sure.
you know, I'm a little bit stressed today. Like, I don't know, you know, things are not, sorry, I can't buy you whatever is the iPhone 70,000 or whatever they're at now, right? Because I'm not working or whatever it is, right? And instead of just being uptight. And so being able to have age-appropriate language with them, because it will help them to learn to express their language
Sure.
as well. But enjoy it if you can. I know it's unprecedented times. I know none of us know what's going to happen, but when's the last time we got to be able to, like, spend the last 3 months with our kids? And, like, yes, it's difficult at times for them as well, but
sure, for everybody. Yeah.
most of us don't, right? Most of us work until we retire, and then we think, oh, we're going to have all this free time to do all this stuff. And most people retire and shortly thereafter die because there's lots of reasons
Sure.
why. Though it's very true, but there's lots of reasons, right? And so, like, we're kind of given this reprieve for a little bit and try to make the most of it and make those memories. Our kids, this is the first time that schools have ever closed down.
Yeah.
Right?
It's
So,
really
like,
weird.
making the memories of it, doing time capsules about it, or
Trying
trying
time
to
capsules.
just
That's cool.
be present with it. Is
Yeah.
it nice? Do we all enjoy it? Absolutely not. But it's reality for right now.
Sure.
And so just trying to make memories and enjoying that time that you get with them.
Yeah. And so in that, okay, so again, it's so great to talk to somebody who actually knows what they're talking about when we talk about human behavior. But so this is just from, I mean, I have some of that training, but let's just from an anecdotal sort of powers of observation standpoint. I think there's been a lot of talk we've had these insights when we go back to normal, or when we recreate something or create something new or whatever, start emerging from this. We've got all these insights. I fear that there's a little bit of just because you have an insight, you're going to magically right? Like, oh, I have this insight about how to be present with my kids, that we think that that's going to somehow automatically translate to action post-quarantine.
Right.
So can you just dispel that right up front for me?
Well, here's the funny thing is they've already been doing studies on what's going to happen, not to our kids, but our pets when we go back. Because,
interesting.
Right? Our pets generally roam the house, secret life pets, whatever they do, right? But now the humans have been home, and animals love that, right? Like,
sure.
Well, unless
except
you're
for the cats, right?
Yeah. But
the cats hate us.
Yeah, they're pretty pissed. They're ready for a vaccine, right? But the rest of, our dogs and stuff. And so, we need to schedule that, right? Everybody says, I used to get people who would tell me, like, I don't know how you have the time to do it. And I'm like, we all have the same amount of time.
Right.
It's about prioritizing.
Right. Everybody's got 24 hours.
So, I don't get magical time.
Right. Right.
And so doing that, making that time, I'm really hoping, this is my hope, which probably won't happen, is that some of these employers will realize how much work can actually be done from home.
Right.
And maybe they will allow, like, remember when the recession hit and people went to like 410s instead of 5/8 or whatever to like cut costs? Maybe we'll start seeing a little bit of that. Maybe we'll be able to do more stuff from home, so to speak, so that we can be with our family.
Right. Sure. Yeah. So it sounds like, even though this time I've been calling it the chronic suck, I think I could say suck. I don't know. Craig's. Yeah. Okay. So I got a nod. So we're good. But it also sounds like it's also this time of, in all of our efforts to try to deal with, this is not good. We don't wish this upon ourselves. This is just where we're at. But there's also some sort of opportunity here to assess and to maybe stop putting off big decisions or.
Right. Well, and I do need to say, disclaimer to this, my biggest fear from the beginning of this are the kids or family, people, humans in general, that are in abusive, neglective, bad homes. Like, please don't think that I'm ignorant to that, because I'm not. Obviously, that is a whole different topic.
That's a whole different thing.
And my heart really goes out to all of them, because generally speaking, the schools, counselors, were the frontline people that
report abuse.
Right. Sometimes it's not, they don't like it, but that's our job, right? And so that's not happening. And so there is not, this is not a perfect fairy tale for every family by any means, but trying to make the best of it with what we have. And, there's a lot of other aspects people are forgetting too, like, what if it's an elderly family member that contracts coronavirus? What do they do with the kids? They can't go into a foster home if they test positive. So where are these kids going, right? There's a lot of dark behavioral health sides of stuff that are also very real right now, and so we need to be cognizant of that as well. But
sure. And so, speaking of being cognizant of it, how can I, as a neighbor and a community member, if I suspect something, what would I do?
Yeah, so I think Pound Safe is the report hotline, but there, CYFD, you can always report. You can call your local law enforcement as well, too, if you suspect abuse or neglect going on.
So that is kind of a great note to wrap it up with. Not that that's a dark note to wrap it up with, but absolutely. The great part of that note to wrap it up with is this is part of becoming better neighbors in general, in deciding how we're going to take care of each other in this crisis time.
Well, and I think we've seen more of that happen, like community support with different things, whether it's food drives or making masks, businesses shutting down, making PPE for the hospital, making hand sanitizer. Whatever it is that people have been doing in the community, like, I'm a big believer that it takes a community, right? I know some people don't agree with those logics or theories, but just being aware, right? Mm-hmm. Like, if you see things that are not normal, like being aware, staying safe, obviously, whatever physical distance that means, but just kind of watching out for one another.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, Dr. Amber Layton, anything else you want to leave us with?
I think those
we're good.
Good. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I feel pretty good about it. So, well, again, I'm Megan Cullip, and I was here with Dr. Amber Layton from ATB Counseling. And so we also want to remind our listeners and viewers that there are many providers in San Juan County that are here to help. And so this is one of them. And if I was looking for some some help, what do I do to get into your practice?
Right. So our phone number is 947-9990. We also have a ATB Behavioral Health Services Facebook page, a website as well.
Great. So there you go. So don't be afraid to take our providers up on their expertise.
Right. And if there's something that we don't specialize in or can't, we're happy to refer to other agencies in the community.
Great. Awesome. Thanks, guys. And we'll catch you next time on this Tangled Live.